for joining me, Khadija. Today, we are going to be talking about a number of different topics that are important for women, especially during this time. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and many Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Khadija, why don't we begin with something about your Ernestines, like the history and how many women are currently residing in your shelter?
Thank you, Mary. I really appreciate you inviting me to share this time with you. And I really appreciate you acknowledging the lands as well, because that's very, very important. Again, my name is Khadija Kathy Ali, and I'm the coordinator of community engagement and volunteers at Ernestine's Women's Shelter. So Ernestine's Women's Shelter is a shelter that's been established in North Etobicoke in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, for well over 36 years. It is a shelter for women and children fleeing from violence and abuse. It is a violence against women shelter. You're hearing a lot, especially during this time, about shelters. There are many different kinds of shelters. There are homeless shelters, which everyone is just wanting to support, especially at this time. Family shelters, teen shelters, pregnant teen shelters. Ernestine's is a part of about a number of violence against women shelters across the GTA. Our particular one, we have 14 rooms established on site. It is broken bones and bruises. It is women and children fleeing from violence and abuse. We've had women come from as far away as Vancouver, Montreal, Windsor. We've had international clients. We are about 10 minutes away from the Toronto airport. So we have had international clients that have come via embassy straight into Canada, and their point of entry is through Ernestine's Women's Shelter. So it started with a group of pioneer women about 36 years ago, realizing that there were no services. 36 years ago, you were told to put up and shut up. A lot of women went to their graves silent. You can speak to, doesn't matter what race, what religion, what community, what culture, they were all told the same thing. We don't talk about these issues. There wasn't that community support that we have so much nowadays. But more so being able to talk about the issue of family and domestic violence. It's not like it's new. Since the beginning of time, there was always violence and abuse. The targets always seem to be women and children, the most vulnerable ones. So the idea of empowering women, giving them the strength, that gender inequality piece that we have in our society, really, really at Ernestine's Women's Shelter, that's part of the mission and the vision, to be able to support every woman, every child, every youth that walks through our door, to be able to say, listen, this doesn't have to be your life. You have the ability to change, just let us help you. So through the same thing with what you're doing, which I really admire what you're doing with the Sheen for She Foundation, which we talked about, really empowering and bringing out that inner strength of every individual that we touch. Over 4,000 women, 4,000 children, youth. We've had babies born at the shelter. This is their home. A lot of the times when they leave, they've left everything. Imagine leaving at 2 a.m. because you have a gun to your head, or you're being told you and your children are going to be killed. You just grab whatever you can and you leave. Who's going to help you? Sometimes family members don't want anything to do with you. Sometimes it's a language issue, a cultural barrier. Like, how are you going to navigate the system? Navigating the health system, navigating the justice system is very difficult. So at Ernestine's, we have a number of programs to support women, counseling individually for women. We have a child and youth program. We have a skills exchange program, which gives them back the skills that they need. We have translators that will come in, so it doesn't matter what language you speak, we give that support. As you know, Mary, affordable housing is a crisis in Toronto, as it is probably everywhere across Canada. So we have a legal housing and settlements counselor on site just to work with the woman, We have court-assisted programs. A lot of these women have to go back into court, face their abusers. The children have to be prepped to be able to go. Do you imagine how difficult that is? To be able to go in and fight for the custody of your children, and navigating the legal system is frightening. So those are a lot of the pieces that we have put together, or the pioneer women have put this together, and we're just enhancing it year by year by year. Charlene Tagason is our executive director that's been here for 28 years. And she said, I didn't think I'd be working here, you know, that this would continue to be an issue. 28 years later, it is an issue. So enhancing all of this, and, you know, community partnerships, education, financial stability and sustainability is what we look for at the shelter. We have a transitional program, an outreach program. So when the women move out, and of course they're staying a little bit longer because of the affordable housing crisis, we have about 100 families across the GTA that we currently support with our on-site food bank and our donations area. So like everyone else, by the time you pay your rent, there's nothing left over for food, for toiletries, just essential items that you need. And I know that you put together the Love Box project, which was fantastic. Just such essential items to be able to support our women at the shelter, because, you know, COVID-19 has changed everyone's lives forever. But those that are isolated and living in isolation, or having to live with their abusers, we need to, you know, ramp it up a lot more to be able to get items to them, to let them know that they're not alone, and to make sure that we can actively support them. So Ernestine's has a 24-hour crisis line that you can call. So it's 416-746-3701. You press 0, speak to a counselor, whatever language, we'll be able to try and support as much as possible. And just so that you can have someone to talk to. So those are a lot of the programming pieces that we do on site at Ernestine's Women's Shelter every day.
That's fantastic, Khadija, and you're doing a lot, especially for women who are going through this difficult time in COVID-19. A lot of the women who used to live in isolation already before the pandemic because of their abusers are now facing even more challenge, because not only are their abusers telling them to stay home, but so is society and public health. It's very important for them to feel connected to the outside world, and with the Love Box project, as you said, it's just a connection. It's an outreach, just letting them know that there are people out there who care about them and their well-being. The Sheen for She Foundation, we really believe in emphasizing that self-care is healthcare. So if they continue to take care of their mental health, just by engaging in small things that can boost their well-being and happiness, it can make them feel a little bit better about their situations and feel that there is hope, even in this time of isolation. And absolutely, during this time, all the services that you're offering are really essential, and we are trying our best to make sure that we can do the same thing as well. Unfortunately, a lot of the in-person programming has been cut, but we are continuing as much programming as we can online. So, for example, with our healing circles, they continue every Monday from 5 to 7 p.m. and they're open to all women who just want to talk about what's going on. And a lot of the time they feel like no one has that importance to hear what they're going through. And it's just a safe platform for them to say whatever they need to or not, and feel that they are still in that secure environment in which they can meet women who are like them, and also hear from professionals who want to lend a helping hand. We have lawyers and life coaches who also join the conversations. Let them know that what they're going through is not impossible to achieve. And if there are things that they need help with, either, as you said, with legal matters or with just life in general and maintaining their mental health, or for their children, we have the advice of professionals and they're able to just talk to them about it. So it's great that our organizations like ours are actively working through this time. And I think it's also important to get the message out that we are working during this time of what kinds of services that we are providing, because we don't want the assumption to be there that there is no help for them. And it's fantastic with what we're doing as a team. And we are really happy to have delivered love boxes to Ernestine's, and hopefully we brought some cheeriness and love to your women, and they felt better after receiving the boxes.
Definitely. We had really good feedback from the women. I think sometimes people don't realize the impact that they have, that someone out there who they don't know just is thinking of them to put these essential items together. And sometimes they cry when they receive it because their own families have either disowned them, they don't want to speak with them, they don't want to hear about the issues anymore. Violence against women is huge. Most women are assaulted 30 to 40 times before they actually pick up the phone to ask for help. And the hardest thing for people to do is to ask for help. The other piece is if their children or their pets are threatened, then they want to get the help. But if it's them, they tend to let's hold it together for as long as I possibly can. And in this period of isolation, it's really hard just being isolated, just like regular someone not going through something, a difficult time, let alone someone who's in an abusive situation. Where are you going to go? So I agree with you, 1,000% in terms of you're not alone, that, there are ways of connecting and connecting on different levels, right? So what you've suggested is really, really good to be able to do. So, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And one essential thing to always realize is that most of these women feel like they're just existing, and either at the shelter or at home, and they're just getting through day by day. So what these love boxes are meant to represent is that they are more important than just existing, and that they should care for themselves to make them feel like they are able to achieve anything that they want to, and that self-nurturance is not selfish. And if they want to care for either their children or their pets, first they need to lift themselves up. And thank you for acknowledging that. And what I'd like to do now is focus more on how COVID-19 is impacting women, either economically, socially, or domestically, in terms of what they're experiencing at home and with violence during their isolation, and what they can do to get help for their situations, and what steps they need to take to make sure that they're safe, even though they're at home.
I think what's really important is violence you can kind of, you can see. The abuse is a lot more subtle. And nowadays, there is such an insensitivity towards abuse and violence. It's almost like a normalized piece. It's recognizing the fact that there is something called the power and control wheel, which I would love everyone to kind of try to find that if you're surfing the internet. And it talks about all the varying ways that there is abuse towards yourself, towards your children, and then recognizing what it is. Because sometimes you don't recognize it if you're with someone for a long period of time. Then there is the pieces that are around addictions and mental health. Addictions and mental health, as you know, is a massive piece. And it's COVID-19 is there's at least more of awareness about it. There's more awareness of support for shelters, which we're very grateful for. More awareness of violence that's going on in the community, but also being able to look at it and understand that you're in that situation. Because the hardest thing is to understand that you may be in an abusive situation, but you don't recognize it, right? It's being able to get that information. Then the resources, there are such amazing resources. Ernestine's is a United Way agency. There are about 250, 60 United Way agencies that can help with addictions. Maybe you're trying to cope yourself in isolations with your addiction or with your mental health piece, and you're not recognizing it. It's really good to get the help. Sometimes you think, you know what, I'm going to hang on and I'm going to hold on. I'm going to try to do this as much as I can, but sometimes it's just, there's so many people out there willing to help. Like our healthcare practitioners, for example, without them, we'd never get through COVID-19. So many people stepped up to help them, during and they were willing to talk about, look, this is mental health. I'm fatigued. I'm in depression. Go into denial when we're dealing with addictive substance, whether it's alcoholism. I think everybody has something that they're dealing with. It's being able to recognize that. The isolation just makes you more isolated. Being able to recognize those pieces and saying, hey, you know what? Maybe I do need to get some help. And there's so much, as you mentioned, online in your foundation, for example, you have people that are willing to give things for free. There are lawyers willing to give things for free, as you mentioned. Just don't feel or think that you can do it alone. Sometimes you really do need to ask for help. And I still think after 30 years later, we have so many services. The hardest thing for people to do is to ask for help.
And I just want to emphasize on that point that you made about actually recognizing when you need help. I think for a lot of women that experiencing violence is something that's ancestral. They've seen their mothers go through it. They've seen their sisters go through it, cousins and friends and neighbors. So for them, it doesn't really stand out as something that needs to be addressed. For them, it's something that a woman just needs to get through and try to cope with. So what really needs to happen here is just the spread of awareness that what you're going through is, first of all, not okay. And no matter what the circumstances or the situations, you don't deserve to be treated that way. And once that acknowledgement happens, that's when the women are able to move forward, because now their eyes are open, like, you know, what's been happening in the past with my family or with people I know was not acceptable. And it's something that I shouldn't have to go through either. So, right, yes.
Mary, it's very interesting you say that, because if you've been told you're fat, dumb, ugly, stupid your whole life, you're going to believe it. If you were told that when you were very young and maybe, got through it, like you mentioned, there are triggers, right? There are things that are going to trigger you when you're in a relationship or a partnership. It doesn't matter what kind of partnership, that it may come up again, but you haven't really dealt with it. Maybe you think you have because you pushed it down, I'm getting through and I'm pushing it down. But those words that a lot of the women say to us, like in our skills exchange program, when we're doing empowerment pieces, our counselors let us know, the women are like, those words, the words are like a knife. It cuts through you. It hurts you. It breaks you. So people think, oh, just a slap in the head and a punch. But the words, the verbally assaulting words, it's really good to learn about verbal assault and verbal abuse, because it's real, and it hurts. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to brush it off. It's no big deal. Or, they say, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to kill you or whatever. They might do it. And you just brush it off as it's no big deal for years and years and years. And then it becomes a reality, right? So our crisis line, we have, like I mentioned before, first time, the assaults happen. The first time, not the 30th time. The first time is where it's important that you say, hey, something's not right here. This is not okay. I really need to get some advice and some help in terms of how do I cope, or how do I get that help? And then maybe I need to get out, how do I do that amicably without it going into violence pieces as well? Those are areas and things we really need to deal with, but we need to deal with it together and not in isolation, because sometimes you think, oh my goodness, I'm the only one going through this, when there are thousands and thousands of women and children going through this every single day in Canada.
Yeah, and I'd just like to build off on that point where you talked about them actually breaking off that cycle and getting help. I think what, especially during this time, prevents a lot of women from taking that step is their economic situation. A lot of them depend financially on their abusers, and either for their children's sake or for themselves, they know that they're not able to withstand the challenges that they're going to face. And it's very realistic in terms of transportation, knowing where to go, getting basic necessities such as food. So it's very challenging, and it's a lot to think about, especially when you're under that pressure. And another important thing to notice, as you said, it was that abuse is very subtle. We think about physical signs, but also what a woman goes through psychologically, and what stays in her mind is sometimes more damaging than what could be on her body. And those bruises, so what we can sort of call them that, just reside with her wherever she goes don't really show up when she attends, like, for example, a healing circle, right? And a lot of time we have women like break down and say that, I did hear this, for example, for them say something to me, and it triggers memories of when the words actually became a reality, and they're punished, or they feel like they're trapped in that situation, but their finances are like chains, right? And for them to know that there's support out there is sometimes just not enough, because they're thinking about, how do I even get there? Because they don't have that kind of control. And I think that if they want to take those next steps, the most important thing is just reaching out and having like helplines like yours, or secure meeting platforms like our healing circles. I think that with those safe areas, women can actually just even just mention that, they need help escaping, or they just need to say the word, and people like us I'm confident we'll be able to find some way or shape or form to get them to move out, or get into a shelter, or just take those next steps that are mandatory. So I think you're absolutely right. And especially during these times, we mustn't just rely on those telltale signs, such as those that you spoke about. So you're absolutely correct. And
we also talk about gender inequality, and I know that's something that's part of your foundation, but it's part of reality for women. The gender inequality, the despairing wage inequalities, right? So being able to survive, and now during COVID-19, you've lost your job. So you lost your job, you're a single mom, in poverty, and even like according to the United Way, Toronto is one of the worst cities for child poverty. They were supposed to abolish child poverty in the year 2000. We're in the year 2020, and child poverty has just gone through the roof. So it's not working, it's not happening. So maybe a male would be able to support the family and the children, and not losing their way of life. But going through a horrific divorce, you could end up in a shelter in a minute. Families are ending up in the shelters because there is no jobs, no income coming in. There's family shelters that have popped up everywhere. Where are they going to go? The homeless issues, they're not homeless for no reason. They're homeless because of that whole domino effect, in terms of, if I lose my job, or if I become sick. If your child is sick, if your child needs special needs and funding has been cut to them, what are you going to do? You are the main caregiver. There is not like you're getting a lot of money to caregive for your parents, a child that's sick, special needs, even your own self. Trying to cope is very, very difficult. So COVID-19 has added so much more to that the violence and abuse, you could see that. I mean, you could see there's more divorces. We're seeing that in the news, or separations happening, trying to see, how do you support the children through that? Are the courts happening? Are through the jail systems, are the abusers being released early because they can't cope with that? What is that effect going to be for the women and children who've gone through violence and abuse? There's safety plans that need to be done. They have to be cared for in the community, because you don't know what's going to happen, right? So there's all those pieces we have to look at. But the gender inequality is just, it's unbelievable, because what choices do you end up having? You don't want women and children living in hotels, no, because you've got sex trafficking, you've got human trafficking, you've got child luring, you've got child pornography going on rampantly. So, you don't want to put women and children in those vulnerable situations where they can be a target, and they will be a target, especially during these very, very difficult times. So, having the community come together, having those community partnerships, having foundations come together like yours, saying, hey, look, what can we do to partner up together? Ernestines need our partners more so now than we've ever needed them before. So we're doing, a lot of reaching out to the community, saying, hey, look, businesses, look, if you've got grants, we need them. Foundation grants, anything. We've got to provide that much more right now for women and children who need that help. They're more vulnerable now than they've ever been before.
Absolutely. And Just picking up from where you said that they don't have the basic necessities to care for themselves or their parents or anyone else who depends on them, we can easily see how self-care comes down to those low priority tasks. And it's very unfortunate that it just gets pushed down and down, based on the responsibilities that the woman has to carry, especially if she becomes single or if she ends up in one of those vulnerable situations, either in a shelter or homeless. So one of the last things she'd probably think about is washing her face in the morning or doing something that makes her feel a little better. So we just want to emphasize really that ignoring yourself is pretty much going to put you at a disadvantage at being able to solve your problems. And one of the biggest solutions, even in real life scenarios, is to first take care of yourself. And community organizations that are coming together like ours are hopefully spreading the same message that right now at this time, it's very important for us to, for example, wash our hands, make sure that we don't go to places that are overly crowded to make sure that we don't catch on with COVID-19. And these simple steps are things that should have been regular in women's lives before any of this happened. But now I think it's a big eye-opener, and now self-care has come to the forefront for everyone now. And you're absolutely right with that. So what I'd like to do is also talk about how Sheen for She and Ernestine's partnership can become more beneficial to your residents as well as our queens.
Well, you know, we have a pretty strong skills exchange program. So by the time the women and children arrive at the shelter, and we have 14 families, we have 14 bedrooms, anywhere from always full, and then unfortunately, but always full, anywhere from sometimes 15 children to 22, depending on the size of the families. We have an elevator as well, so women who are disabled or in a wheelchair have access to shelter as well, because that's also very important. Vulnerable sectors, not only senior women, but women that are, you know, disabilities, all kinds of abilities or disabilities they have, that's important as well. So we would have on-site things like self-defense, and we have, so the child and youth will take the children for their own programming, and then the women would come together. We bring professionals into the shelter, for example, and they do taiko drumming, dance, yoga, and whatever skills that they have. Sometimes they lead the yoga in teaching, because that's empowering as well, so they take the lead. Dance, financial literacy is huge for women, because a lot of the times they're not allowed to go to the bank. I mean, they are working, but they get the paycheck is taken depending on the family situation. So they've never done their banking or financial literacy. Positive parenting programs is also important, because it's changing, you know, bringing the empowerment piece in. If you've been screamed at your whole life, then that's probably the only way you learn. So how do we do conflict resolution? How do we work those pieces together, you know, and everything from jewelry making to makeup, as you have provided in the love boxes as well, you know, because when you look good, you feel good, better about yourself. So being able to, when this pandemic and COVID-19 makes the world safer, we could get back to doing that again. So you could do yoga in the backyard with the women, or you could do a dance in the main space again, or the legal aspects you were talking about, because legality, you know, lawyers are expensive. Even the legal aid, it's good to go through, but they've had cutbacks in legal aid, so that makes it harder for women in shelters, right? So being able to have access to that, they come in and, you know, in our boardroom, you could have the women and have sessions. They can do Q&A, questions and answers, things, but in a safe environment, you know, because being able to trust is a huge issue. So it takes them a long time to trust us. And we have, you know, our staff is diverse, very diverse, speak different languages, but it takes a while for them to trust again. So when they're here, they know they're under safety and protection, that we'll not expose them under any circumstances to any abusers or any abusive sort of situation or environments, or people as well. So that's where the partnerships are really important, the programs that you have, and your donors and your sponsors as well. But we would be able to do that on site at the shelter, which is wonderful. I mean, being able to do it, the Zooms and all of that is wonderful, but there's nothing like human beings. I mean, we're social animals, right? I think everyone is still missing getting back to, being able to see someone and say, hey, how are you? How the children, the grandkids, how's that happening? But more so when you're going through violence abuse, you need that so much more. You need to hear a kind voice. You need to hear someone in a loving way saying, hi, honey, how are you today? Sweetie, what do you need? And it's kind of like when the women land here and our counselors say, well, what is it you really want to do? And the women are like, no one's ever asked me that. Life just kind of happened. I had to go to school and I had to do this and I had to be a breadwinner and I had to earn and I had to, make the food and the dinner. No one ever asked me what I really wanted to do. So then we're like, this is your opportunity. You want to go back to school. We have partnerships with colleges and universities and special programs, that we can expedite to help you. What is it you always wanted to do? Some women, you asked about some success stories, gone back to college and university. Some have gone and gotten their social work programs. Some have become paralegals, 20 years later, we're seeing some women donating. I remember celebrating my children's birthday at the shelter, or my baby being born, and this was their first home. You did a baby shower for me. You did a birthday party for me, those are things you never forget when someone helps you. You don't forget that. It's during the hard times, you can't find anybody. During the good times, oh my goodness, people want to amalgamate, they want to go out with you, they want to hang out with you. That doesn't last. But so when you're going through that really difficult time, you see the back of people's heads, including your own families sometimes. But the ones that are really like, come on, you can do this, you can get through it. We know you can. We'll go step by step with you. So when our staff members go to court and say, look, you can do this, you can get custody of your children. If access you want, that's fine. If you feel that's not going to happen, that's fine, but you got to fight for it, right? So it's being able to have those people that will walk shoulder to shoulder and carry you if you need to be carried during those times. And that's what you need, and you want, but you don't know how to ask, right? You don't know how to ask. So being able to have those partnerships to say, hey, look, we've got lawyers, we've got people that'll do learning circles. Oh, they're going to come in next week. And that's part of our programming that we've built in at the shelter. And that's why the success has been very good at Ernestine's Women's Shelter, in terms of having the women be empowered, like you said, shine from the inside out, but they don't forget, they don't forget.
Wow, that's very powerful. And I definitely can see our partnerships working with the healing circles, our self-defense training and self-care training. And what we really push to do is, like you said, help them feel better about themselves, because that's normally the first step that you have to take to do something. And with our self-defense training, for example, we have professionals come in and tell them about what needs to be done in order to escape an attack, or just by a couple of seconds to get away from something that could be potentially life endangering. With our self-care training, we do a lot of focus on making women ready for the professional environment. It might be something they haven't gone to for a long time. So we also do resume checks, we check their cover letters, we do mock interviews, and try our best to make them feel prepared and ready to go back into that workforce, or even enter it for the first time if that's their case. So yeah, we would be very happy to, just come in, like you said, and have those partnerships take place and help as many women as we can. And I'd like to then close with just saying, if you have any feedback about our programs and what we do at the Sheen for She Foundation, because we are new and we are learning from organizations like yours.
Thank you so very much. And we're learning every day, because it's the pioneer women really who set the foundation for the mission and vision. And I'm just so lucky that, Ernestine Van Marl and the group of women that started, the shelter, were able to enhance a lot of the programs that we have. So being able to outreach with you as well, it's really, really important that we do work together to empower, every woman, every child that comes through, the shelter. And we do look forward to working with you. The the items themselves, like you talk about, that you put in the love boxes. So the big Home Depot box filled with items with everything from makeup. There was a T-shirt so that they can enjoy making something for themselves. There was food in there, all kinds of things from that you had donated to us was amazing. Because that's important, that they're able to take care of themselves. We do know that the women aren't really eating, they want to make sure that they're providing for their children or for their family. So being able, as you said, to take care of yourself, being able to empower yourself, it's the age-old analogy, if the plane is going down, they tell you on the plane, put that oxygen mask on yourself, because if you can't breathe to take care of your children, who's going to be able to do it when that ship's going down or that plane is going down? It's the same thing. You need to empower yourself. You need to be strong. You need to get that strength. And you need other people, like I said, to carry you, to say kind words, to give you those things that are like, wow, that's for me. I certainly can't afford to buy that. The makeup kits that you put together, those things, I can't afford this. Our women can't just walk into these stores and purchase these items. It's expensive. Regular families can't do that right now with COVID. So how are disadvantaged families going to be able to do that as well? So it's really, really important that we maintain the relationships, the positive, the empowering. You talk about community development. That's what we're about. You talk about conquering the world. Well, that's what we're about. And it starts in the community. Once you strengthen communities, you will strengthen the cities, the provinces, and then the country. And we are local to global. You can find every single race, religion, culture, right within our cities. And we are local to global. So we can send the message back that, yes, this is what we're doing here. You can do it as well. Ernestine's participated in a project with Crossroads International and went to Togo and Tanzania because they were setting up shelters. They sent some of their administrators here, shadowed Ernestine's and said, how did you do this? This is amazing that the shelter is operational. And they said it inspired them to continue to want to set up shelters in Africa and in many different parts of the world. So that's, you have the ability to change society, be the change you want to see in the world, right? That's what you want, but also being able to empower and learn from one another. So we're able to learn from you, from your professionals and everyone, and you're able to learn from us. And that's what a good, strong, healthy partnership is all about.
Yes, thank you so much for your insight, feedback, and words of encouragement, Khadija. And we really appreciate all the work that Ernestine is doing for women at this time. And we're so excited to have that partnership with you so that we can continue to strengthen our community and eventually our world. Thank you so much for your time again, Khadija, and take care.
You too. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.